Welcome. Thank you for coming out for our 31st Police Awards banquet. This is a 2016 celebration, and we know it's a very busy time of year, but these stories you'll hear tonight are just a peek of a solid foundation we have ahead of us. So it's wonderful. Right next to me is Director of Public Safety, Director Josh Meyer, Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire. We have 4 lieutenants who were able to make it. And to my right are some of our police employees. And sprinkled in there are some of our partners in law enforcement and in our private industry, especially an undercover person from Home Depot that came here from Atlanta, Georgia, just for this event. Also, we'd like to thank you for this opportunity on behalf of all of the employees here. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to serve this community. It's been wonderful. These opportunities to serve you have been profound on each one of us, our lives, and we would like to thank you for that opportunity. Also, we'd like to thank the families who sacrifice often on holidays and nights home alone, and sometimes when employees are thinking about work when they're at work. So we'd like to thank each and every one of the family members that are here, especially the children and the wives and the husbands. Also in the audience, we wouldn't be set up for this success if it wasn't for some of the dignitaries that are in the audience. And if you would, stand when I call your name, and we'll hold the applause until afterwards. In the audience, we have Commissioner Joe Barone, Representative Jeff Noble, Representative Christy Pagan, Supervisor Pat Williams, Township Treasurer Diane Slavens, Trustee John Anthony, and Judge Mike Drew. If he's in the audience, please stand up. Also in the audience, some of the people that helped us build this organization as it is today. Phil LaJoy is in the audience tonight, former Township Supervisor. Tom Yak, a past supervisor and trustee. And John Santamaro is in the audience also. Thank you for building this solid foundation and putting us in this position to succeed. We also like to thank the Village Theater, the Canton Community TV, and Roses for providing all the support they have for us tonight, including sponsoring this event. If you would at this time, colors. Honor Guard, post the colors. Please rise. Alexandria Wallman now will sing our national anthem. Please put your hands over your heart.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air,
If you would, please have a seat. I'm going to ask Deacon to come up. Deacon Pat Conlon's going to give our invocation. If you would, Deacon, come on up. Thank you, Deacon.
Well, I was prepared for the benediction, not the invocation, so you've got an Irish preacher and a microphone, so get comfortable. I'm off script. I know that we come together today. Everyone's had a busy day. Everyone's had a hectic day, I'm sure. But we come together this evening as members of this fine community. We come from many different experiences of how God moves in our lives, different places that we pray, different names that we call God. But one thing that is true for all of us this evening, we are all part of the human family. We are all connected one with the other. And we come together this evening to honor these men and women who have dedicated their lives to the service of Canton and the Canton citizens. And so I ask you to pray with me now. Good and gracious God, thank you for bringing us together this evening, for the time that we can share. Thank you for the meal that we shared. We ask you to open our hearts this evening. Help us to be aware of your presence among us. Guide the discussions. We ask you to bless all those who receive awards this evening. Bless their families. Bless the people that they serve. And in a special way, bless all those this day who will go to bed hungry, those who are alone, those who have no voice. Help us in our efforts to serve them, to lift them up, and to help them establish the dignity that they deserve. Most loving God, again, we thank you for this evening, for your presence, and for your many blessings. Amen.
Good evening, and welcome to the Canton Police Department's 31st Annual Awards Program. We have many deserving officers to recognize tonight, so I will keep my comments brief. 2016 was a difficult year for law enforcement. 135 police officers were killed in the line of duty. 64 of them were shot to death, and 21 of them ambushed, simply because of the profession they chose and the uniform they wore. At a time when many would question why anyone would want to take on that kind of risk and do the job of the police, our officers rose up. United, they memorialized the fallen officers and went back to work to serve our community, stand watch so that we can enjoy our safety, and most importantly, to ensure those that made the ultimate sacrifice did not do so in vain. Together, we have accomplished a lot of great things in the past year, but most importantly, we have gained community support at a time when many police departments are under intense scrutiny. These gains were not by accident, but as the result of transparency and strong cultural foundation built on public trust. This foundation was not built overnight and took a significant amount of effort and dedication from the department's leadership and officers alike. Tonight, we have an opportunity to recognize our officers, support staff, and others who have gone above the norm in service to our community. Before we begin our program, I want to share with you a quick inspirational speech that Mike Barwis, professional athletic trainer and owner of the Barwis Methods Gym, made regarding self-worth. As I share this with you, I think you will find it fitting of the police officers with us tonight. Society tends to ordain worth on our income. The reality is, how much money you make, the position you stand in, have nothing to do with self-worth. Worth is determined by character. Worth is determined by intensity. Worth is determined by effort. The drive you are willing to put into your life to sacrifice everything you have for everyone around you. You do not find worth in dollars. You will not find worth in position. Your character will not be judged by the amount of money you have resting in your checking account. It will be judged by what you sacrifice of yourself for other individuals on this earth before you leave. Most of us will not experience Donald Trump wealth in our lifetime, but I challenge everyone here tonight to find your self-worth through sacrificing of yourself for someone else. To the families of our police officers here tonight, thank you. Thank you for the sacrifices you make each and every day that your loved one is away serving our community. Most will never know the challenges you face or the stress you endure as a police officer's family. Please know that you are not alone and that your sacrifice is very much appreciated by this department and the Canton community. To our police officers, thank you. Thank you for standing with me and working hard every day to ensure the residents and visitors of our community are safe. Thank you for the sacrifices you make, the risks you take, and the compassion you show through service. There is no doubt we have found and will continue to find your self-worth. Please enjoy this evening and take great pride in all that you have accomplished. Thank you. I will now present some Director Recognition Awards. I take great pleasure in presenting the 2016 Director's Recognition Award to Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire. Deputy Chief Wilshire was hired by the Canton Police Department in 1998 as a police officer, promoted to sergeant in 2008, and promoted to a lieutenant in 2013. He was later promoted to the rank of Deputy Chief in January of 2017. In November of 2014, Deputy Chief Wilshire was assigned as the Special Services Lieutenant in charge of the Detective Bureau in the reaccreditation process with the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. In his role as the CALEA Accreditation Manager, Deputy Chief Wilshire was responsible for ensuring the department received its third reaccreditation with CALEA. During this time, while Deputy Chief Wilshire was in charge of the daily operations of the Detective Bureau and CALEA's reaccreditation process, he also successfully completed the FBI Academy, which was held for 10 weeks in Virginia. Although this training was very extensive, Deputy Chief Wilshire continued to work on the reaccreditation process while still in training away from home. Anyone who has been involved in CALEA's reaccreditation will confirm that this is a very difficult and time-consuming responsibility. Deputy Chief Wilshire was tasked with the dual role of managing the Detective Bureau while continuing to work on the reaccreditation during the most stressful time, locating difficult proofs, and preparing for an on-site assessment with CALEA. The process of achieving reaccreditation requires a substantial commitment. Deputy Chief Wilshire's devotion to this challenging task ensured that the demanding standards of CALEA were met. Through his hard work, high motivation, and dedication, the department was able to achieve this prestigious reaccreditation with CALEA. This organization recognizes Deputy Chief Wilshire for his hard work, dedication, and time. I take great pleasure in presenting a 2016 Director's Recognition Award to Sergeant David Isle, Officer Andrew Curry, and Officer Edward Yachts. In 2016, Canton Police Department was one of 5 police agencies in the country to receive a Model Agency Award from NASRO, the National Association of School Resource Officers. The department was recognized with this prestigious award for the tremendous accomplishments of our School Resource Officer program, or more specifically, the work of the SROs David Isle, Andrew Curry, and Edward Yachts. While assigned to the Plymouth Canton Community Educational Park campus, consisting of 3 high schools and approximately 10,000 students, faculty, and staff members. SROs Isle, Curry, and Yachts expanded the traditional role of school resource officer with innovative ideas, programs, and problem solving to address the trends and needs of the PCEP's unique campus. These SROs built relationships with the students, providing a multitude of safety and educational opportunities ranging from instructional classroom programs to interactive safe driving simulation during lunch hours. SROs Isle, Curry, and Yachts were also instrumental in developing creative training opportunities for the faculty and staff including PCEP's first active shooter lockdown drill during passing time, a major undertaking for a campus of this size. In addition to their outstanding program efforts, these officers are commended for their successful approach to reducing crime on campus, boasting a 30% decrease in just 4 years. The benchmark for school resource officer program has been raised due to the hard work, integrity, and dedication of these officers, creating a safe, educational high school environment on the PCEP campus. I take great pleasure in presenting a 2016 Director's Recognition Award to Barb Brule. In 2016, the Canton Police Department experienced an unprecedented number of new hires and promotions, with the bulk of the work falling on Canton's Human Resources Supervisor, Barb Brule. The staffing storm began early in the year, starting with my promotion to Public Safety Director. What followed was nothing short of a miracle, due in large part to the efforts of Barb Brule and her willingness to do whatever it took to meet the needs of the police department. Barb contributed to the creation of our new Deputy Director position, followed by the development and execution of a promotional process to fill the new role. Barb continued to be instrumental in the administration of 3 additional promotional processes for Deputy Chief, Lieutenant, and Sergeant eligibility lists. At the request of my office, many of these processes were run concurrently due to the urgency of filling the vacancies. With all the promotions aside, the department was simultaneously in need of filling numerous vacancies for police officers, ordnance officers, PSSOs, and clerical positions. Barb administered 3 internal and 4 external hiring processes for these positions, resulting in the hiring of 9 new employees to the department. Barb's positive attitude and yes we can answer to every daunting request thrown at her did not go unnoticed. Her commitment to fulfilling the police department's staffing needs with qualified personnel while simultaneously juggling a multitude of requests from others in the township resulted in the enhancement of the Canton Police Department's exceptional workforce. The next award is for William Askew, Robert DeBow, Shane Fritz, and Mark Trombetta. All right, I will now introduce Deputy Director Baugh, who will take over.
All right. It's time for the Officer of the Year and the Civilian of the Year awards. We're going to start with the Officer of the Year, Patty Essling. If you would stand up there. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting the 2016 Officer of the Year Award to Officer Patty Essling. For service set forth in the following, Officer Patty Essling has been a member of the Canton Police Department since April of 2001. During her 16-year tenure, she has been an active in many special assignments, including the Detective Bureau, Bicycle Unit, Explorer Post Advisor, and Team Instructor. In 2015, she left her Detective Bureau to take a new assignment as the department's Community Relations Officer. In her position as the Community Relations Officer, Officer Essling continually builds positive relationships within the township. She plays an integral part of the Canton Response to Hate Crimes Coalition and has assisted the Canton Library in hosting the Get to Know Your Muslim Neighbor Night and Meet Your Sikh Neighbor event. In 2016, she was instrumental in the Not in Our Town National Night Out initiative. Many organizations in our community, as well as the residents, enjoyed this cultural sharing of ideas. Patty has led the Canton's Protecting Our Places of Worships project, and several of our houses of worship have since implemented security teams based on her recommendations. Over the summer of 2016, Patty created Crafting with a Cop for the youth in one of Canton's mobile home parks. She also was involved with the Canton Youth Connection and an after-school program for students and the Canton's Block Youth and Teen Center. As you can tell, she's a very busy person. Officer Esselink had the pleasure of sharing the love of her career with participants of the Leisure Services Lead Like a Girl program, encouraging females to go after their dreams. Patty also was involved in a department's Citizen Police Academy. In this series of seminars, participants are educated in the policies and procedures of the department through presentations, demonstrations, and hands-on activities. This program helps develop positive relationships between our citizens and police officers, enhancing cooperation and understanding and goodwill. Officer Esselink developed Partners in Your Safety, a neighborhood initiative to encourage residents to be aware of their surroundings and report unusual or suspicious activity. She also brought back Canton's Safe and Sound and Secure Seminar for citizens 55 and over. This forum covered topics such as personal safety and medical emergencies. It is evident Officer Esselink is extremely successful in her role as a community relations officer. Her positive attitude, dedication, and commitment to the organization most certainly exemplifies qualities worthy of this recognition. If you would now, please. Tony? The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting the 2016 Civilian of the Year Award to Clerk Anthony Fife. For service as set forth in the following, Anthony Fife began his career with the Canton Department of Public Safety in August of 2010 in the Records Bureau. In 2013, he was promoted to Clerk 3 and was entrusted with vast responsibilities that comprise the position of Public Safety Finance Clerk. In his role as the Finance Clerk, he's precise, he's meticulous. All of us know this very well. He monitors our financial activities of the department. His tireless follow-up with both vendors and personnel ensures unfailing accuracy of expenditures incurred by the department. Tony takes pride in his work and produces meaningful results in short order. His attendance at Township Board meetings on his personal time demonstrates his desire to go the extra mile for the organization. Tony is a team player. His finance role requires him to effectively interact with personnel throughout the township. He's also tasked with duties outside his realm of finance. He oversees the quartermaster system for our police department, which consists of ordering uniforms for every employee, everything from the officer's hat to the civilian shoes. He's often seen sorting through boxes and boxes of uniforms and deliveries just to find a badge holder or a tie for an officer immediately. He also assists with auditing and database tracking. He acts as a backup property clerk. He's always willing to answer phones and direct callers to the appropriate personnel. His handling of asset forfeiture cases requires him to track minute details in the management of confiscated monies and property. These cases entail complex interactions between the public and the police department, the prosecutor's office. Tony has demonstrated his ability to balance effective and prompt communication and accurate record keeping in the performance of these duties. Since the beginning of his career with the Canton Department of Public Safety, Tony has delivered excellent service to those who live in, work in, and visit our community. He has embraced and demonstrated our daily core values of our organizations. If you would. All right, Deputy Chief Wilshire, if you come up, appreciate it.
Good evening. First thing I'd like to do is recognize officers and their service to the community. So for the longevity, if you could please stand when I call your name. So 25 years of service, Lieutenant Pat Sullivan. 20 years of service, Deputy Director Chad Baugh. 20 years of service, Sergeant Eric Kolke. 20 years of service, Officer Jeff Besesson. And also 20 years of service, Officer James Marinelli. You came a little too quick with that. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting the 2016 Longevity Recognition Award to the following officers for the service set forth following in the certificate. This is awarded for meritorious service to department personnel who have upheld department standards in conduct and professionalism. The Director of Public Safety takes great pride in commending you for your dedication and conscientiousness. By their meritorious service, they have contributed significantly to the accomplishments of the law enforcement and upheld the finest traditions of the Canton Public Safety Department. Thank you for your service. We're also going to recognize officers with safe driving awards. So for 20 years of safe driving, Deputy Director Chad Baugh. Please stand. 15 years, Sergeant Eric Kolke. Also 15 years, Officer George Duncan. It's just you. Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Safe Driving Award to the following officers for services set forth in this certificate. This award is presented to officers who have operated department motor vehicles without a chargeable accident. The vehicles assigned to these officers have been driven in emergency situations, inclement weather, and on good and bad road surfaces with the utmost care and caution. The Director of Public Safety takes great pride in commending you for your dedication and conscientiousness. By your meritorious service, you have contributed to the significant accomplishments of law enforcement and upheld the finest traditions of the Canton Public Safety Department. Thank you. Can I please have Officer Jason Singleton? The Director of Public Safety takes great pleasure in presenting the 2016 Lou Stevens Memorial Community Service Award to Officer Jason Singleton for services set forth in the following. Officer Jason Singleton has been interacting with the residents and management in the Canton Crossings apartment complex for several years. He continually works to foster good relationships and regularly meets with the residents and management in an effort to establish trust and cooperation. And over the years, it hasn't been easy because we've had management change multiple times in ownership. So he's done a very good job of keeping those relationships open with the community in order to address their problems. During his meeting, Officer Singleton addresses quality of life issues and provides crime updates and safety tips. Officer Singleton has also helped to mediate concerns between residents and management and also worked with local retailers to supply presents to families in need during the holiday season. The Director of Public Safety takes great pride in commending Officer Singleton for his dedication in upholding the department's standards and expectations of conduct and professionalism at all times. Thank you very much for service. Can I please have Lieutenant Scott Houston, Sergeant Ed Johnson, Sergeant Dale Waltz, Officer Pete Alestra. Are you listening? Good job. Officer Melissa Andes, Officer Jeff Besesson, Officer Jason Blickensdorf, Officer George Hall, Officer Brandon Hayford, Officer Jeff Seifert, Detective James Marinelli, and Detective Brian Zinzer. The Director of Public Safety takes great pleasure in presenting a 2016 unit commendation to these officers for the service as set forth in the following. On December 6, 2016, Canton Dispatch received a call of two males subjects removing packages from porches and opening them. Sergeant Johnson and Sergeant Waltz proceeded to the subdivision and observed the two males running away from location. The sergeants immediately began chase of the suspects on foot while additional units were on the way. Moments later, the officers and detectives arrived to the area and began searching for the suspects. Lieutenant Houston located one of the suspects hiding behind a bush. He and Sergeant Johnson took control of the suspect while Officer Andes and Sergeant Waltz placed him in handcuffs. In the meantime, a description and possible location of the second subject was communicated to other officers in the area. Detective Marinelli spotted the second subject behind a small church near Cherry Hill, but the subject then fled on foot. Officers Andes drove towards Detective Marinelli's whereabouts and located the suspect. She exited her vehicle and gave the suspect verbal commands. They were able to take control of the suspect, and Detective Zinser helped with the arrest. Due to the collaborative efforts and professionalism displayed by all these officers, this incident ended safely and successfully, resulting in the recovery of property and arrest of both subjects. Thank you for your service. You're staying up.
I know. I'll pretend like I'm
Some of you are going to stay up here. Lieutenant Scott Houston, Officer Jason Blickensdorf, Officer Brandon Hayford, Officer Jeff Seifert, Officer Nabil Syed, Detective James Marinelli, Detective Jeffrey Zajac, PSSO Lacey Burnt, PSSO Joshua Charoba, and PSSO Kathleen Gazy. The Director of Public Safety takes great pleasure in presenting a 2016 Unit Commendation Award to these officers and dispatchers for services set forth in the following. On December 11, 2016, PSSO Burnt received a call from the IKEA reporting that someone had used a fraudulent credit card to return merchandise. PSSO Burnt conveyed the information to officers and reported the suspects had just left IKEA in a vehicle with 2 other passengers. Officer Syed arrived at the store and met with loss prevention personnel. Officer Syed was informed that the suspects had made the same fraudulent purchases at multiple locations around the Detroit area. PSSO Charoba, Burnt, and Gazy utilized police radio to keep officers informed as to the whereabouts of the suspect's vehicle. Officer Hayford was in the area of I-275 and Michigan Avenue and advised dispatch he was following the vehicles. Lieutenant Houston, Officer Seifert, and Officer Blickensdorf moved to the area and continued following onto I-275 southbound. The suspects were eventually stopped and multiple fraudulent credit cards were discovered inside the vehicle. It was further determined that the vehicle was stolen out of Port Huron, and Detective Zinser and Marinelli, let me repeat that, Detective Zajac and Marinelli were able to get a confession from the 2 suspects. Due to the excellent teamwork by all parties involved, a stolen vehicle was recovered, confessions were obtained, and the 3 suspects arrested were charged with legal use of credit card. Thank you for your service.
I'm done.
Now I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Pat Sullivan.
The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 unit commendation to Officer Lua Raj, Officer Timothy Bentley, Officer Daniel Bergsma, Officer Matthew DeLong, Officer Jessica Natilla, and Officer Peter Posant. For their services set forth in the following. On January 12th, On January 12, 2016, Canton officers were dispatched to an attempted larceny from auto of tires and rims. The victim had stated a male wearing a red jacket was looking into her SUV, which was parked in the driveway. The suspect then got into a green Chevrolet van and drove off. Officer Peter Passant stopped the Chevrolet van with a driver wearing a red hoodie as the vehicle was exiting the subdivision. Officer Passant questioned the driver and passenger and observed the back seats of the van were missing. The driver consented to a search of his vehicle, and Officer Araj located a bag of green leafy substance in the center console. Officer DeLong found a car jack, tire iron, breaker bar, and landscaping blocks under a blanket in the back of the van. Officer Bergsma went to the victim's home to interview her and confirmed the victim's vehicle had lug nuts missing from the wheels. Officer Natilla, the evidence tech, took photos of 2 sets of footprints at the victim's home. She then photographed the interior and exterior of the suspect's van. The suspected leafy substance subsequently tested positive for marijuana. Both the driver and the passenger were arrested for attempted larceny. Nice job. Jess, stay put. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 commendation to Officer Jessica Natilla for services as set forth in the following. While on patrol during the early morning hours of March 3rd, 2016, Officer Jessica Natilla initiated a traffic stop. Upon making contact with the driver and the 2 occupants, Officer Natilla immediately smelled the odor of marijuana coming from the vehicle. Upon investigation, Officer Natilla discovered the driver had outstanding warrants and a restricted license, and he was placed under arrest. One of the passengers had 4 debit cards in his possession. None of the cards were in his own name. The third occupant lied about his identity. Canton dispatchers contacted the person who actually did own the debit cards, and the man confirmed his wallet was stolen in a carjacking a few days before. The second occupant was then placed under arrest for possession of stolen financial transaction devices. Officer Natilla spent several hours investigating the carjacking. She spoke to that victim and discovered that he had recovered the vehicle. Nice job. Officer Anthony Johnson, Officer Jason Singleton, and Sergeant David Juris. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 department citation to Officer Anthony Johnson and Officer Jason Singleton, as well as a 2016 Certificate of Merit to Sergeant David Juris for the service set forth in the following. On March 3rd, 2016, Officer Jason Singleton was dispatched to an armed robbery which had just occurred at a business on Ford Road. Dispatch gave a description of the suspect and advised he was armed and was running through a parking lot. Officer Singleton entered the parking lot and observed the subject, at which time he exited his patrol car and advised the male to get on the ground with his hands up. The male continued to flee toward a fence. Officer Singleton got back into his vehicle and drove onto construction property in order to follow the subject. He again found the male and, armed with his AR-15, pursued the man, continuously ordering him to the ground. The suspect did not comply and continued to run. Officer Singleton carried on the pursuit and observed a knife in the man's hand. The male then turned to face Officer Singleton, and as the officer again ordered the man to the ground, the subject put the knife up to his own neck. He then began to walk away, still with the knife at his own neck. At that time, Officer Anthony Johnson arrived on the scene. Officer Johnson kept his gun on the man while Officer Singleton brought out his taser. Officer Singleton deployed the taser, and Officer Johnson was able to get the knife away from the suspect. The man was then taken into custody. Detective David Juris, the officer in charge of the case, interviewed the suspect at the Canton Police Department, where the suspect confessed to committing the crime. The defendant was charged with robbery armed, larceny in a building, and a fourth offense habitual offender notice was given by the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Good work. If I could have Lieutenant Michael Kennedy, Sergeant Joseph Biley, Officer Timothy Bentley, Officer Evan Culberson, Officer Matthew DeLong, Officer Peter Passant, and Officer Michael Titterington. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Department Citation Award to Lieutenant Michael Kennedy, Sergeant Joseph Biley, Officer Timothy Bentley, Officer Evan Culberson, Officer Matthew DeLong, Officer Passant, and Officer Titterington for their services as set forth in the following. On March 12, 2016, Lieutenant Kennedy and Officer Passant responded to a residence regarding a schizophrenic male who was off of his medication. The male had punched his brother-in-law in the face 3 times and struck his sister with a broom. Upon the officer's arrival, the male suspect barricaded himself in his bedroom and began throwing items out the window. Sergeant Biley and Officers Culberson, Titterington, DeLong, and Bentley arrived to assist. After hours of failed negotiations to get him to surrender, the suspect displayed a lighter to the officers and suggested he was going to light some candles. However, his sister stated that due to his mental condition, there was a chance he would start a fire in the home. Officer DeLong utilized a shield and breached the barricaded bedroom with the other officers. The suspect immediately became combative, but the officers were able to gain control of the suspect. The male was transported to a local hospital for evaluation. Based on their heroic actions and teamwork, the officers were able to prevent this person from starting a fire and further harming others while ensuring he received proper medical services. Good job. Sergeant David Juris, Sergeant John Wallace, and Officer Jessica Natilla. You guys doing this by height? All right. The Director of Public, what's that? The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 unit commendation for services as set forth in the following. On November 29, 2016, Officer Natilla stopped a speeding motorist, which led to an investigation of the vehicle. Upon questioning the driver and reviewing the information available, Officer Natilla noticed several plate and VIN discrepancies. The vehicle also had numerous tires and rims in the trunk and the back seat. Officer Natilla continued with her investigation and located a VIN on the engine block that revealed the vehicle to be stolen. During a later interview, it was determined the arrestee had likely stolen the vehicle and then re-tagged it with a VIN plate from his previous vehicle. At the time, the arrestee asserted that he acquired the batteries and rims from his employer. Sergeant Wallace recalled a previous case involving the theft of rims and batteries from E&M Auto, and he requested that the day shift follow up. Sergeant Juris, then a detective, made contact with E&M and determined the rims and batteries were indeed stolen, and the arrestee was also responsible for thefts that occurred on November 19th of 2016. Due to the combined total effort and diligent investigation from these officers, multiple criminal cases were cleared. Good work. Good job, Sergeant Joseph Biley, Officer Evan Culberson, Officer Kenneth Robinson, and Officer Andrew Tauscher. Guess you're it. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 unit commendation for services as set forth in the following. Officer Tauscher and Officer Culberson spent their Christmas Eve patrolling the Canton hotels looking for a bank robbery suspect who lived in Canton and who had robbed banks in Taylor and Detroit. The officers made contact with several clerks advising them to call the Canton Police Department if the suspect arrived at their hotel. Later that evening, the officers were contacted by a clerk who advised them that the suspect had indeed checked in and then left the hotel. Sergeant Biley and Canine Officer Robinson and his partner Thor arrived at the hotel to assist officers. Sergeant Biley implemented a plan that put Officers Tauscher and Culberson in plain clothes, one being stationed by the front desk and the other by the front door. The suspect returned to the hotel, and the officers promptly arrested him without incident. Taylor police officers arrived at the scene and conducted a search of the suspect's room, which yielded evidence from their bank robbery, including money. Based on the officers' investigation and teamwork, bank robbery charges against the suspect were secured by the Taylor Police Department, and a violent felon was taken off the streets during the holiday season. Good job. I would like to now introduce Lieutenant Scott Houston.
All right, for this one, it's going to be a unit commendation. So the following, officers and Lieutenant Michael Kennedy, Sergeant David Juris, Officer Peter Lestra, Officer Lua Raj, Officer Daniel Bergsma, Officer Jeffrey Besesson, Officer Jacob Crittenden, Officer George Hall, Officer Jessica Nutella, Officer Peter Passant, Officer Jeffrey Seifert, Officer Michael Titterington, and Detective Joseph Kaimig. Make sure everybody gets up there. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Unit Commendation Award to the officers for the service as set forth in the following. On December 20th, 2016, Officer Seifert and Hall responded to T&M Auto to investigate a report of a stolen Chevy van that was loaded up with rims from the warehouse on the property. While the two officers interviewed the employee who made the report, additional units were dispatched to the area, but were unable to locate the stolen vehicle. Officer Lestra went to a nearby metal recycling business and learned that the suspect had just sold the rims prior to his arrival. Officer Lestra was given a description of the suspect and informed officers over the radio. Officer Besesson collected evidence from the scene at T&M Auto, also collecting fingerprints from the rims that were sold at the recycling business. At the time, Sergeant Juris, Detective Keimig, and I believe it was Detective Juris at the time, became involved with the investigation. The suspect was identified. The suspect was further observed on multiple occasions in the area of T&M, conducting further crimes. While Officer Araj was conducting surveillance of the T&M Auto facility, he observed a van matching the UTA description, the stolen vehicle. Lieutenant Kennedy was notified, and notified Officer Araj to stay with the vehicle until other officers were in the area. Officer Araj followed the vehicle southbound on Sheldon, but the van began traveling at a high rate of speed. Lieutenant Kennedy monitored the pursuit and prepared a plan to stop the vehicle. Officer Araj advised dispatch they were approaching a red light. Lieutenant Kennedy made the call for officers to box in the vehicle. Seconds later, Officer Crittenden, Bergsma, Passant, Nutella, and Titterington arrived with their emergency lights activated and boxed in the suspect. Due to the collaborative efforts and professionalism displayed by all officers and PSSOs involved in the incident, it ended safely and successfully, resulting in an arrest and recovery of the property and stolen vehicle. The next officers to come up, Sergeant John Wallace, Officer Christy Even, Officer Lamar Frederick, Officer Jason Singleton, and PSSO Laura Wade. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Department citation to the officers for the service as set forth in the following. On June 5th, 2016, PSSO Wade was communicating with the girlfriend of a suicidal male. The girlfriend was in a vehicle with the male while he was driving around looking for an overpass to jump from. The girlfriend was conveying their current locations to PSSO Wade. Officer Singleton Frederick proceeded to the overpass at I-275 in Warren to intercept the male, but he observed their patrol car and sped off. A vehicle pursuit was initiated but soon terminated when the male refused to stop. The officers continued to monitor and maintain visual contact. The subject then dropped his girlfriend off and went back to the overpass where he climbed over the railing. Officer Even was able to distract him until Officer Singleton and Sergeant Wallace pulled him back safely from the railing. Due to their heroic actions and responsive teamwork during this critical situation, the officers were able to save the individual's life and ensure that he received the necessary treatment. The following officers come up: Officer Timothy Bentley, Officer Joseph Dahl, Officer Brandon Hayford, Officer Christy Even, Detective Joseph Keimig, and Detective Andrew Kelly. I think Andy's coming from... Is Andy? There he is. Hang on. Oh, there he is. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Unit Commendation Award to the following officers for the services set forth in the following. On April 26, 2016, Officer Dahl and Officer Hayford were dispatched to the Canton Public Library to investigate a report of a male exposing himself. Officer Dahl, Even, and Hayford met with a citizen who stated that the man had exposed himself to her while inside the library. Officer Dahl and Hayford spoke with library security and were able to locate a picture of the suspect and his license plate. Officer Even followed up on the plate number and found the vehicle owner was a registered sex offender. She communicated this to the other officers. Officer Dahl, Hayford investigated further and determined the suspect had recently been exposing himself to people in neighboring cities. The case was assigned to Detective Keimig. He discovered the suspect was on parole and wearing a tether. Detective Kymig and Detective Kelly were able to use the GPS information from the tether to place the suspect inside the library at the time of the incident. They further discovered through the GPS that the suspect was driving toward the library and had currently arrived. Officer Bentley located the suspect in his vehicle and placed him under arrest. The officers involved conducted a thorough investigation and provided valuable intelligence to the detectives who utilized unique research tools to assist them in arresting the suspect. Good job, Ben. Nice job, Mr. Dowell. The director would like to take pleasure in presenting a life-saving award to Officer Jeffrey Seifert and a unit commendation award to Officer Blickensdorf and Joseph Dahl. Officer Dahl. For the services as set forth in the following, on October 2nd of 2016, the Canton Police Department was contacted by a female who reported that her son was missing and may have possibly run away. Approximately 2 hours later, the Plymouth Township Police Department found the young boy and returned him home. Officers Seifert, Blickensdorf, and Dahl went into the family home to speak with the mother and the son. Upon arriving at their apartment complex, the officers observed the boy hanging out of the second-floor window and threatening to jump. Officers Blickensdorf and Dahl took a position underneath the bedroom window and proceeded to give the child verbal commands to back away from the window. Meanwhile, Officer Seifert ran into the apartment upstairs to the bedroom. Officer Seifert broke down the door in order to get in the room. He grabbed the boy before he was able to jump. As a result, Officers Seifert, Blickensdorf, and Dahl's immediate reaction to this crucial situation, a young boy was stopped from making a disastrous, life-threatening decision. Sergeant Gregory DeGrand and Officer Randolph Rankin. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 commendation to the following officers for the services set forth in the following. On January 14, 2016, Officer Rankin made a routine traffic stop on Michigan Avenue. Upon approaching the vehicle, he could smell a faint odor of marijuana. He observed a large bag in the back seat and a backpack. Sergeant DeGrand arrived at the scene and made contact with the passenger. Both the driver and passenger stated there was no marijuana inside the vehicle. While searching the driver, Officer Rankin found several money cards. A probable cause search of the vehicle revealed a small amount of suspected marijuana, which later tested positive. The bag and backpack were both full of packaged Visa and MasterCards. Neither occupant had proof of purchasing the cards. It was discovered they were loading stolen cards illegally and selling them on the street to make a profit. Both suspects were charged with fraud. And this one is for PSSO Scott Porter. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Life-Saving Award to PSSO Scott Porter for services set forth in the following. On May 8, 2016, PSSO Porter answered a 911 call from an 18-year-old Canton resident who was concerned for a friend after receiving a text about a suicide. The caller was unable to provide any information other than her friend's name, phone number, and that she lived in North Carolina. PSSO Porter used this information and called the cell phone provider, ultimately locating the girl's father in Maryland. The father was skeptical at first, but eventually provided an address which led PSSO Porter to contact Kingston Police Department in North Carolina. PSSO Porter remained persistent and worked with Kingston PD to locate the girl. Kingston officers had to force entry into the home where the young lady had taken a large amount of controlled medication and had written 4 suicide notes. She was subsequently taken to the hospital for treatment, and her father later called the department to thank PSSO Porter for his service and for saving his daughter's life. Due to PSSO Porter's persistence in locating this young girl, Kingston officers were able to save her life and get her the necessary medical treatment needed. Next up is Lieutenant Steck.
The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 unit commendation to Sergeant David Juris, Sergeant Daniel Traylor, Detective Andrew Kelly, Detective Lieutenant Charles Bazzi from Van Buren, Detective Ken Toney from Van Buren, and Sergeant Michael Dortch from Ann Arbor PD. On June 10th, 2016, Canton police officers were dispatched to investigate an armed robbery reported at the Super 8 Hotel. The robbery, which was captured on surveillance video, showed a male jumping over the lobby counter and pointing a gun at the front desk clerk. The suspect demanded cash out of the register and then took the victim's cell phone and laptop prior to fleeing to the parking lot where a vehicle was waiting. Detective Kelly was assigned as the lead detective in the case, and he, along with Detective Sergeant Traylor, immediately began a search of the victim's cell phone, which last pinged in the area of Michigan Avenue and Denton. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that Van Buren and Ann Arbor had recently experienced similar robberies. In the Van Buren case, officers recovered a Michigan ID card belonging to a subject who was recently incarcerated. Van Buren investigators, Lieutenant Bazzi and Detective Toney, interviewed the male prisoner and showed him surveillance video from our Canton robbery. The prisoner recognized the suspect in the video and revealed his name to the detectives. Prior to completing a search warrant, Detective Kelly was advised that the Ann Arbor Police Department had the suspect and his girlfriend in custody. He was further provided the address of where the suspect was staying. Detective Kelly completed the search warrant, and Sergeant Traylor, Detective Juris, Lieutenant Bazzi, and Ann Arbor Detective Michael Dortch assisted him with the execution of the search warrant. Several items linking the suspect to the crimes were recovered from the location. The suspect ultimately confessed to participating in all 3 robberies during his interview with Detectives Kelly and Juris. And due to the comprehensive interviewing, thorough investigating, and excellent police work by all the officers involved here, the suspect confessed to multiple robberies and was charged with multiple felonies, including armed robbery and felony firearm. Nice job. Thanks a lot. Okay. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Certificate of Merit to Deputy Director Chad Baugh, Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire, Sergeant David Juris, Detective Sergeant Dan Traylor, Sergeant John Wallace, Detective Justin Arminiak, Detective Adam Falk, Detective Andrew Kelly, Detective Jeremy Quinn, Detective Adam Schulman, Detective Jeffrey Sajak, and Detective Brian Zinzer. On January 7th, 2016, members of the Canton Detective Bureau, along with Western Wayne Narcotics and the Criminal Response Team, executed a dual search warrant at a liquor store in Detroit and also at a residence in Farmington Hills. Deputy Director Ball had learned from investigations over the previous 2 years that individuals involved in the demand for stolen retail goods routinely come to Canton to steal high-value items, then resell them in shops elsewhere in Metro Detroit. Detective Wallace had interviewed multiple sources and had an intensive month-long organized retail crime investigation. Over several days, the surveillance team went to the store numerous times to sell items such as baby formula, liquor, cigarettes, and gift cards, which were supplied to us by asset protection managers from stores in the Canton area. These successful interactions between undercover officers and the liquor store manager resulted in search warrants being obtained for both the store and the liquor store owner's home. Due to the investigative work by this team of officers and the execution of these search warrants, thousands of dollars worth of suspected stolen merchandise was recovered at the store, as well as a large quantity of items that were used to remodel the defendant's residence. The defendant was subsequently charged with 1 count of conducting a criminal enterprise, 4 counts of organized retail fraud, 2 counts of felony receiving and concealing, and 2 counts of misdemeanor receiving and concealing. Nice job. A lot of the same folks here. You might as well stay up. Come on. Might as well stay up here. Stay. Appreciate it, really. Yeah. Okay, the Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Certificate of Merit to Deputy Director Chad Baugh, Sergeant David Juris, Sergeant Mickey, Sergeant Daniel Trailer, Sergeant John Wallace, Officer Melissa Andes, Detective Justin Arminiak, Officer Jeffrey Besessin, Detective Joe Keimig, Detective Michelle Kuznicki, Detective Jeremy Quinn, Detective Adam Schulman, Detective Jeffrey Zajac, Detective Brian Zinzer, Clerk Anthony Fife, Detective Adam Falk, Detective Steve Cheston from Plymouth Township, Detective Jerome Jackman from Northfield Township, Detective Sergeant Robert Tornad from MSP, Mr. Jeremy Greenleaf from Home Depot, Mr. Trent Peoples from Walmart, and Miss Sarah Shea from Meyer. Okay. In late 2015, early 2016, the Canton Police detectives and officers listed here, along with the Western Wayne personnel, conducted a 3-month undercover organized retail crime operation. The goal of the operation was to interrupt the purchase of stolen merchandise by a pawn shop located in the Downriver area. This merchandise was stolen from local retailers, and the operation consisted of multiple undercover sales aided by Home Depot, Walmart, and Meijer personnel. The lengthy, complex process entailed numerous undercover visits to the location in an effort to secure more evidence against the defendant. The operation ended with a search warrant being executed at the 3 locations and the recovery of a large amount of suspected stolen property. All of the participants were involved in this case through transactions, surveillance, interviews, or distribution and collection of property. Detective Schulman was able to obtain from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office a multi-count warrant for criminal enterprise, conspiracy, and multiple counts of organized retail crime. Nice job. Detective Joe Keimig and Detective Michelle Kuznicki. Well, the Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Certificate of Merit to Detective Keimig and Detective Michelle Kuznicki for the service as set forth in the following. On April 12th, 2016, a female victim had been cleaning a home in Canton when her employer attempted to sexually assault her. The victim left the location and ran to a nearby house and contacted the Canton Police Department. Detectives Keimig and Kuznicki interviewed the victim and proceeded to the location of the assault. They collected evidence from the scene and were later able to identify the suspect. The detectives then went to the suspect's home and took him in for questioning. All of the evidence and information obtained by the detectives was submitted to the prosecutor's office for review, and a felony warrant request was later approved. Due to the hard work and thorough investigation by these 2 detectives, the suspect was charged with 2 counts of criminal sexual conduct. Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Certificate of Merit to Sergeant Dan Traylor, Officer Timothy Bentley, Officer Michael Kirby, Officer Joe Vogt, Officer Gregory Warnicki, Detective Joe Kamig, Detective Michelle Kuznicki, Detective Adam Schulman, Detective Jeffrey Zajac, and Trent Peoples from Walmart. On November 14th, 2016, officers Bentley, Kirby, Vogt, and Warnicki responded to a retail fraud complaint at Sam's Club. Loss Prevention reported that 3 males attempted to use fraudulent cards to purchase a variety of gift cards and merchandise at a self-service register. The suspects were seen leaving the parking lot in a dark-colored van and driving towards the Walmart store. While en route to Sam's Club, officers Bentley and Kirby were redirected to the Walmart store. Upon their arrival, the officers observed a parked van that fit the description of the suspect's vehicle. The officers positioned themselves nearby and observed 3 males getting into the van. They drove their patrol cars up to the van and made contact with the passengers. At that time, Officer Bentley observed several gift cards in the center console of the van. He then asked for identification and permission to search the van. During the search, Officer Bentley discovered several prepaid Visa cards and numerous department store gift cards. All 3 suspects presented the officers with Florida driver's licenses, which were later confirmed to be fraudulent. The suspects were taken into custody, and the information was turned over to the Detective Bureau for further investigation. Sergeant Dan Traylor and Detective Zajac, Kaime, Kuznicki, and Schulman took over the case and began a thorough investigation. During the investigation, a hotel room key card was located, and a search warrant for that room was executed. Mr. Trent Peoples assisted detectives with searching the room, and a variety of gift cards, credit cards, and merchandise was discovered during the search. Due to the diligence and teamwork displayed by all the parties involved, a credit card scam was disrupted, property was seized, and 3 suspects were arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud. Good job, Joe. Okay, the Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Unit Commendation Award to Lieutenant Michael Kennedy, Sergeant Joseph Biley, Sergeant Aaron Mickey, Sergeant Dan Traylor, Officer Cody Barnes, Officer Daniel Bergsma, Officer Eric Kalidas, Officer Randy Rankin, Detective Adam Falk, Detective Joseph Kaimeg, Detective James Marinelli, Detective Zajac, Detective Zinzer, Detective Sergeant Paul Kalia, Detective Sergeant Andrew Osborne, Detective Steve Cheston, Detective Andrew Coletta, Detective Daniel MacArthur, Trooper Mark Besner, and Trooper Robert Ternad. Everybody. On November 15th, 2016, a caller contacted dispatch and reported that a man with a bloody face was standing on his front porch. Officers arrived at the location and made contact with the victim, who stated he had been assaulted by an unknown male. He explained that the suspect suddenly hit him in the face and tried to strangle him with an extension cord. Officers and detectives interviewed the victim at the hospital, and it was determined the victim had met an unknown male on the internet and made arrangements to meet him at a local location in Detroit. The victim brought the male back to his home, and after pulling into the garage, the male suspect attacked the victim and fled the area in his vehicle. The vehicle information was entered into lien, and evidence was collected from the hospital and the victim's home. Sergeant Mickey was informed of the incident, and the Western Wayne CRT team and the Michigan State Police became involved in the case. The victim's vehicle was eventually located in Detroit, and CRT maintained close and constant surveillance of the vehicle until Trooper Besner and Trooper Ternad were able to initiate a traffic stop and apprehend the passengers. The officers involved contributed significantly through interviews, communication with law enforcement agencies, surveillance, and collection of evidence. Due to the collaborative efforts displayed by all participants, 2 suspects were arrested and charged with vehicle theft and assault with intent to murder. Nice job. All right, 10 more. We'll be done. I just got one more. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Certificate of Merit to, there's a video with this award, Sergeant Joseph Biley, Sergeant Aaron Mickey, Detective Justin Armeniak, Officer Cody Barnes, Officer Larry Frederick, Officer Mike Kowalski, Detective Joe Kymig, Detective Andrew Kelly, Detective Jeffrey Zajac, MSP Sergeant Amanda Crooker, Officer Bruce Shippey from Garden City, and K-9 Officer Rudy. On January 14th, 2016, a subject wearing a mask entered a bank located at Ford Road and presented a note to the teller regarding a robbery. The subject left the location after the teller refused to give him money. Officer Larry Frederick was dispatched to the location and assisted Officer Bruce Shippey and K-9 Officer Rudy with a track. They discovered footprints leading through several yards and also discovered a black mask, black plastic mask, similar to that worn by the suspect. Officer Cody Barnes checked all the businesses in the area for possible video footage, and Officer Mike Kowalski took photos of the area and collected the robbery note and mask. Detectives Jeffrey Zajac and Andrew Kelly responded to the scene and interviewed several witnesses who gave descriptions of the robber. The detectives were able to confirm what the suspect was wearing at the time of the robbery. The note and mask were turned over to MSP Sergeant Amanda Crooker for analysis. A few days later, Sergeant Crooker reported she had developed an identification from the prints on the robbery note. Meanwhile, Detective Sergeant Aaron Mickey was able to confirm a phone number belonging to the suspect. And with this information, 2 search warrant requests were made to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. During this process, the suspect was caught outside of the residence and arrested on probable cause. Several officers, including Sergeant Joe Biley and Detectives Joe Kymig and Justin Armeniak, executed the search warrants and recovered a sweatshirt matching the suspect's clothing and paper identical to the robbery note. At the Canton Police Department, Detective Kelly interviewed the suspect extensively, obtaining a confession from him. Detective Kelly was unable to obtain a felony warrant against the suspect for 1 count of bank robbery and 1 count of robbery armed. Nice job.
This is the Canton Police Department. What's going on? This is Canton Township Citizens Bank on Fort Integrity. We had an attempted robbery. A guy was circling our building. We went to lock the door, but we didn't make it. When did this happen? Just about 5 minutes ago. 5 minutes ago? Do you know which way he left? He went south down Haggerty. What did they take anything? It sounds like no, the teller didn't have any money out at the time, and he told them to leave. So he left. So it was just an attempted robbery. But he had a mask on. He walked in, and what did he do? He passed us a note. Passed a note that said, told the teller to give him his car keys and $60,000 in cash. Told teller to give him his car keys and $60,000 in cash. Did he have any weapons? $60,000. $60,000 in cash. Did he have a weapon? None that we've seen. Okay. He had a mask on and gloves, and he was in all black. A mask and gloves? In all black? Yeah, he was over 6 feet tall. Over 6 feet? Mhm. Did he leave in a vehicle? No, he left on foot. He left on foot, southbound Haggerty? Yes.
So now, Mike Kennedy.
The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Life Saving Award to Officer Joseph Vogt. For service set forth in the following: on September 28, 2016, Officer Vogt responded to an address in the crossings to check on an individual who was possibly suicidal. The subject sent a text message to her estranged ex-husband requesting to tell their daughters that she loved them and not to let their son be the first inside the residence. The officers secured a key to the residence. Upon entry to the home, Officer Vogt located the individual in a bathtub full of water. She was holding a large ceramic knife and a bottle of tequila. Officer Vogt established a rapport with her and talked her into putting the knife down. She was later transported to a local hospital for proper medical treatment. Due to Officer Vogt's immediate response to this critical situation, officers were able to save the woman's life and get her the necessary medical treatment. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Certificate of Merit Award to Lieutenant Michael Steckel, Sergeant Gregory DeGran, Sergeant David Juris, Sergeant Aaron Mickey, Sergeant John Wallace, Officer Matthew Burt, Officer Darren Cossack, Officer James Marinelli, Officer Nabil Syed, Detective Adam Falk, Detective Adam Schulman, Detective Jeffrey Zajac, Detective Brian Zinzer, PSSO Patrick Laskaska, PSSO Rachel Rowell, PSSO Deanna Zilka, Detective Steve Cheston, and Detective Daniel MacArthur.
Canton Police and Fire Laskaska.
Hi, this is Nikhil from Dyke Security. Could I please get dispatch on a burglary alarm?
What's the business name?
Haggerty Drugs,
Where's it coming from?
through the front door. And I just got some more signals, lobby motion and also a side door.
Charlie 13, Charlie 30, copy of 201. Said the Haggerty Drug Store, front door and multiple motion alarms.
13 is B&E over here. Just took off running from the front door. Got a couple that just ran north through the woods from the building, from the medical building. I got a van leaving right now, too. 13, I'm going to be following the van southbound on Haggerty, waiting for another unit to head over here. And 13 is not stopping right now, still southbound on Haggerty. Pulling in the Maria's lot. 13, we're going to do a felony stop real fast. We got one coming out of the vehicle right now, radio. 13, we're secure over here now. We got one across here right now. They got a pry bar here in the van. 45 to the rest of the units. They hauled a safe out of here, so there's definitely a third one. A pretty large safe. 45 radio, can you try getting a hold of a key holder?
On June 13, 2016, officers were dispatched to investigate a security alarm call at a Canton pharmacy. Officer Cossack arrived at the location and observed two males running away from the pharmacy towards the woods. He further noticed a black van exiting the parking lot as he was pulling in. Officer Cossack activated his overhead lights and attempted to conduct a traffic stop while Officer Burt followed closely behind them. The driver eventually stopped the van and was apprehended by the officers. Officer Marinelli arrived on scene and searched the vehicle. During the search, he discovered a steel pry bar lying on the floor. Lieutenant Steckel, Sergeant DeGran, Sergeant Wallace, and Officer Syed set up a perimeter around the woods in an attempt to locate the other two suspects. Moments later, dispatch received a 911 call from a subject who claimed he had been shot by two males. Knowing that the caller was possibly one of the suspects, they pinged the phone and gave officers an exact location of the suspects. Sergeant DeGran found one of the suspects and took him into custody. Detectives Zajac and Schulman interviewed the two suspects and obtained crucial information on the third, who resided in Detroit. Detective Zajac, along with the other Canton detectives and community response team members, executed a search warrant of the residence and collected the necessary evidence to arrest the third suspect. Due to thorough investigating, interviewing, and collecting of evidence, all participants involved in this case contributed significantly to the apprehension, confession, and felony charges to all 3 subjects. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Unit Commendation Award to Lieutenant Michael Steckel, Sergeant Gregory DeGran, Officer Evan Culberson, Officer Jennifer Janola, and Officer Darren Kosick. On June 3rd, 2016, Canton police officers were advised to be on the lookout for a black Chevy Trailblazer recently stolen from a resident's driveway. While searching through the area, Lieutenant Steckel observed a dark-colored Trailblazer and contacted dispatch to confirm the license plate number. Lieutenant Steckel continued to drive behind the Trailblazer until they were both stopped for a red light at Ford and Haggerty. Sergeant DeGrand and Officers Kosick, Culberson, and Janola rushed to the location to assist Lieutenant Steckel. While Lieutenant Steckel was behind the Trailblazer at the red light, Sergeant DeGrand pulled his patrol car directly in front of the stolen vehicle. Officers Kosick, Culberson, and Janola pulled up next to the Trailblazer and proceeded to box it in and execute a traffic stop. Due to the diligence and excellent teamwork displayed by these officers, a stolen vehicle was recovered and a potentially dangerous pursuit was avoided. The Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Life Saving Award to Officer Jason Singleton, PSSO Deanna Zilka, Firefighter Tom Agos, Firefighter Adam DeCrane, Firefighter Brian Fitzgerald, and Firefighter Ryan Winowicki. On January 2nd, 2016, PSSO Deanna Zilka received a call from a frantic person who stated her cousin was unconscious. The person had been dizzy and fell onto the bathroom floor. PSSO Zilka dispatched the fire department and attempted to help the caller determine whether or not the patient was breathing. It was determined the person was not breathing, and PSSO Zilka began giving CPR instructions to the caller. Officer Jason Singleton was the first to arrive on the scene. He cleared the family from the area and attempted to locate a pulse on the victim. He confirmed the person was not breathing and initiated CPR compressions. When firefighters Agos, DeCrane, Fitzgerald, and Winowicki arrived, they were advised the patient had recently had heart surgery. Compressions continued and the patient began to have labored breathing and the pulse was still minimal. Firefighters used the automatic external defibrillator and Officer Singleton resumed compressions. Firefighters were able to get a stronger pulse and the patient was breathing and was then transported to the hospital. The collaborative efforts and quick actions of all persons involved played a crucial part in saving this person's life. The Director of Public Safety takes great pleasure in presenting a 2016 Life Saving Award to Sergeant Joseph Biley. Sergeant Biley is working the road tonight, so he's supervising those that are working right now. On May 11th, 2016, Canton Dispatch received a call of a female who was not breathing and had possibly overdosed on heroin. Sergeant Biley was monitoring the radio at the time and responded to the location. He was the first to arrive on scene and immediately entered the home. Sergeant Biley found the unresponsive female not breathing and without a pulse. He immediately took over CPR and began to apply chest compressions to the victim. After the fourth round of compressions, the female took a large breath and was revived. Moments later, the Canton Fire Department arrived at the scene and took over medical treatment. As a result of Sergeant Biley's immediate response and critical reaction in administering CPR, the victim regained consciousness and received further treatment at a local hospital where she recovered from the overdose. And lastly, the Director of Public Safety takes pleasure in presenting a 2016 Certificate of Merit to Sergeant Joseph Biley, Officer Corey Altime, Officer Joseph Dahl, Officer Kenneth Montone, Officer Darren Kosick, Officer Dane Haskin, Officer Michael Hinkle. On October 29th, 2016, officers were dispatched to the Crossings apartment complex for a disorderly male. Upon arrival, officers found the suspect yelling and running through the parking lot. Officers attempted to calm the suspect, but their attempts failed. The suspect then ran headfirst into a parked vehicle, breaking out the window with his head. This caused significant bleeding to the suspect as well as damage to the vehicle. The suspect charged at the officers, causing them to utilize their tasers. Officer Kosick rushed in and knocked the suspect to the ground using the patrol shield as protection. Once on the ground, the suspect continued to fight and struggle, biting one of the officers. Officers were able to secure the suspect until the Canton Fire Department arrived and transported him to a local hospital. I'd now like to introduce Officer Melissa Andes for a tribute to fallen officers.
You choose to be an officer. It's your duty and your call. You serve no matter what the risk, in crisis, great or small. Preserving life and liberties from jeopardy and from threat, no matter what the time or cause, you respond without regret. The thin blue line of courage is a symbol that reflects the depth of strength to conquer fear, your commitment and respect. When duty calls, the race begins, day's end is unbeknown. Though focused at the work at hand, I know your heart's at home. I give to you the special gift, a heart for us to share, holding precious words of love for days so hard to bear. Every moment of every day, in my heart you'll always be. We'll never be far apart. You'll always have a piece of me. Please help me in remembering the fallen officers who have died in the line of duty. For our own Officer Gordon Lou Stevens, Canton Police Department, end of watch, July 23rd, 2003. Sergeant Colin James Rose, Wayne State University, end of watch, November 23rd, 2016. Officer Myron Anthony Jarrett, Detroit Police Department, end of watch, October 28th, 2016. Sergeant Kenneth Melvin Steele, Detroit Police Department, end of watch, September 17th, 2016. Security Supervisor Joseph Peter Zangaro, Berrien County Trial Court, end of watch, July 11th, 2016. Court Officer Ronald Eugene Kenzel, Berrien County Trial Court, end of watch, July 11th, 2016. Sergeant Kevin Dwayne Miller, Detroit Police Department, end of watch, June 29th, 2016. And Deputy Michael Arthur Winter, Branch County Sheriff's Office, end of watch, May 31st, 2016. Please join me in a moment of silence.
Before Deputy Director Ball closes out our ceremony tonight, I wanted to take a quick moment and thank the awards committee for their unselfish dedication to put this program together. I also want to thank our officers and PSSOs here tonight and the ones that couldn't be here tonight for their dedication and courage throughout 2016 to do all the great things that we heard about tonight. As Director of Public Safety, I take great pride in leading one of the best police departments in the region. Tonight, we have seen a small sampling of the work our police officers do on a regular basis to reduce crime and keep our community safe. I want to thank our Township Board for their continued support of public safety, and I want to personally thank our police officers, PSSOs, ordinance officers, clerical and support staff for their commitment and dedication to this department. Thank you for attending, and have a safe evening.
Again, we would like to thank singer Alexandria Wallman for coming out tonight. The Village Theater, again, thank you for all your work tonight, and the personnel working. Cable TV, Canton Cable, thanks. Departmental personnel, thank you. You're some of the finest police officers, public safety service officers, and civilian employees in the state of Michigan. Thank you. Chaplain Conlon, if you would, please come up for the benediction.
I'm sure it goes without saying, but all here understand that working in law enforcement has never been an easy task. But in our society today, it seems to be more difficult than ever before. Many are quick to criticize, and the media seems to love a story that may cast a dark cloud over the work you do and the challenges you face. With that in mind, let us take a moment to thank God for this time together and for the many blessings we have received both in our professional and personal lives. Too often we take these gifts for granted and don't recognize the simple joys present every day. And so we pray. Most generous God, we thank you for this evening and for the gifts of family and friends, of community and colleagues. We thank you for the opportunity to serve the people of this community and for our part in making Canton a great place in which to live and work. Every day we have the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others, and that is truly a blessing for which we are very grateful. As we have honored the special achievements of members of this department, we ask that you fill each of us with the desire to be the best we can be, and that you give us the grace and strength to make that possible. We lift up in prayer all the needs we hold in our hearts, and ask for your blessings on those in our community in the greatest needs this day. Most loving God, I ask you to hold all the members of this department close to yourself. Bless their efforts to help each other, to help others, and return them home safely at the end of each shift. We offer these and all the prayers of our hearts to you, whose mercy has no limit and whose love is never ending. Amen. And may God bless us all.
Honor Guard, if you would please now withdraw the colors. Everyone stand, please. Again, thank you for coming. That concludes our 2016 Police Awards. See you next year.